And the Eagles are so much better than the Eagles.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So that at the beginning of this video was none other than Pennsylvania Democrat Senate nominee John Fetterman saying that the Eagles are better than the Eagles for some reason, referring to football because this is his knowledge and how he is trying to relate to voters of the state of Pennsylvania, and he is doing so very poorly as he is losing in nearly every single poll and Oz is gaining in every single poll. I have said for quite some time that Fetterman has a ceiling of 48%, and he is falling down in a lot of these polls below that. Even the latest poll out of Emerson has him at 45, has Oz at 43. Plenty of undecided voters, which also happen to be Republicans, actually, which is very interesting, and it shows that voters are shifting towards Oz, partially because Fetterman has a very far-left track record, and also because the guy makes Joe Biden look like a Mensa patient by comparison, as seen at the beginning of this video. This guy is not just a gaffe machine like once or twice a rally. It's almost every time that he opens his mouth. No wonder why he has dodged a debate, and when the debate finally happens in late October, that very well could be the final nail in the coffin. So, I wanted to explain in this video why Dr. Oz is almost certainly going to win. I also wanted to talk about Doug Mastriano and why so many people are writing him off, but why they exactly shouldn't, especially at this point, because the polls have been really underestimating a certain regional demographic of the state, and especially this year in the primaries, and I'm going to prove it. But first, I have to tell you guys about our sponsor over at the Epoch Times. What is the Epoch Times? The Epoch Times brings you breaking U.S. and world news on all your devices and original Epoch TV programs like popular podcasts and award-winning documentaries. Why do we trust the Epoch Times? Because they report important news and facts that other media ignore. They focus on clear, fact-based journalism without spin or hidden agendas, so you can arrive at your own conclusions. Despite the attacks from many sides and the defamation from other media, the Epoch Times continue to dedicate themselves to reporting the truth, so give them a try. We'd think you'd like it. We have a special offer for our viewers here. $1 for 2 months, so go over to epochtime.es/redeagle and subscribe. The link is in the pinned comment down below. So this Emerson poll was huge news for Dr. Oz because he is, narrowing the gap. The polls a few months ago had him down close to 10 points in a lot of cases, and a lot of people were starting to write off Dr. Oz, saying he couldn't get the base on board, and a lot of people were bracing for impact regarding the prospects of future Senator John Fetterman. But I knew in my gut there's no way this happens. Oz is running a decent campaign now. He's, talking about crime. He's talking about the issues that matter to voters in the state of Pennsylvania, and he's actually getting out there and campaigning. He's not hiding in his basement. Fetterman is doing the Biden strategy, but it's not really working out for him very well because every time he does step out on the campaign trail, he makes 20,000 times more gaffes than Biden ever made, which that's saying something given the fact that Biden is one of the most gaffe-prone politicians, arguably in American history. John Fetterman is going out there trying to outdo him, basically, and it shows in every single poll. You look at RCP, you look at the shifts. Fetterman, he was up big. He was winning by 8.7% about a month and a half ago. That has been cut in half, and now Fetterman leads by just 4.1% so far. And that is with some polls like Franklin and Marshall in the aggregate that had McGinty beating Toomey by like 10 in 2016. You have Marist, which is really overestimated Democrats the past couple of cycles. They have Fetterman up by 7. But the rest of the polls have this as, a lean D to a toss-up ball game. And that says something, especially in the Rust Belt in Pennsylvania. And you look at Trafalgar, they had Fetterman up by 2. In their previous poll, they had him up by 4. And this is a recurring theme that continues. And actually, I believe the Trafalgar poll actually had Fetterman only up by like 1.2 or something like that. But when you round it up, it made it look like he had a 2-point lead. So that's why RCP says that. But you look at this and you see the fact Fox shows Oz gaining a net 7 points. Franklin and Marshall shows him gaining a net 9 points. And Trafalgar shows Oz gaining a net 2 points or so, which shows that Oz has the momentum and that Fetterman is peaking. Like I said, 48%. We know which way the undecided voters typically go in Pennsylvania, arguably the shy voters, but also a lot of the undecided voters in the state of Pennsylvania do tend to be Republicans that do not really fully trust Dr. Oz, but a lot of them are starting to come on board, mainly because Fetterman is just downright insane. And as a result, it's going to help Dr. Oz out at the end of the day. And like I said, there has been a massive polling error miss in Western Pennsylvania. This is a recurring theme that we have seen. Rural Western Pennsylvania is missed significantly. They missed it in 2016, in 2020, throughout much of the election cycle, and they also missed it in the primaries, and it shows, and it's absolutely true. You look at the Republican primary for the Senate race, David McCormick was actually down at below 20% in the polling aggregate, and he ended up winning 31.1% of the vote. Dr. Oz barely beat him when McCormick was expected to come in third place, whereas Barnett performed right where her polling was, and she did the best in eastern Pennsylvania. And Dr. Oz outperformed the polls by 5, and he did better than Barnett did in much of western Pennsylvania, which really says something. And you look at the map right here, and this is very true. McCormick did very well in a lot of the western Pennsylvania area. It's not because he really spoke to those voters or had a record that was in line with those voters, but because a lot of media spent time attacking Dr. Oz's stances instead of McCormick's, whereas McCormick was able to use his money to flood the airwaves as a grift and say that he was America first, despite the fact that he supported the impeachment of Trump in early 2021. It was all a grift, but it definitely paid off because a lot of people didn't like Oz. They just didn't really know about McCormick and his stances, which were far worse than Dr. Oz's in the past. And you look at Western Pennsylvania and you see the fact that he did very well where he tried to campaign there. He's from Western Pennsylvania, and he outperformed the polls significantly there. And you look at the fact that in terms of Mastriano and how well Mastriano did in the primary for the governorship, he vastly outperformed the polls. Nobody ever talks about it because the polls had him winning. But you look at the polls for governor, Mastriano was only slated to win by 14. He won by 24. And you could say, well, that's because of undecided voters. But do you really think every single undecided voter went for Doug Mastriano? Every single one? I'm sure he won a majority of them. But literally every single undecided voter likely did not go for Doug Mastriano. We know this. The polls have these errors time and time again. It is malpractice is really what it is. And in terms of the primary, he did very well in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, and a lot of polls might be underestimating him again there. And that's why you see all these polls that have Mastriano down by 10. You have Doug Ducey doing what he does best and writing Mastriano off because Mastriano is just, an actual conservative, unlike Doug Ducey. And they're spending money on other states that are probably less likely to flip than Pennsylvania. But either way, it's very likely that the polls are missing something. This is true. If you look at the fact that they consistently have underestimated Republicans in this part of the state, in western Pennsylvania, where they are doing better in recent election cycles, where they are running up the margin. You talk about Josh Shapiro. Look at Josh Shapiro and his performance in 2020 when he ran for AG. He went up against a candidate that had zero funding, zero ads, zero commercials, zero endorsements whatsoever. And the polls had Josh Shapiro winning in some cases by, at this far out, 20 points or so. Some polls, I think the final polls had him winning by closer to 10 to 15, and they said it was likely D, and the final result was lean D, you could say. It was a 4.5% ball game, which was basically what the national environment was, and you're talking about a polling error miss of more than 10 points. You're talking about the fact that the race voted in line with the national environment. We very well could see this again if the rural base turns out for Mastriano, which I believe that they will, and the polls consistently keep missing it. You look at the fact that some polls will have it in the margin of error, and then the other half of the polling firms will have Mastriano down by 10. Very interesting what's going on there. And yeah, I know he hasn't spent a dime. Some people are saying that that makes him DOA. I don't necessarily believe that to be the case because we are in a new era of politics. I'm not saying that he would win if the election was today, but I'm saying that there is a very good chance that Doug Mastriano does go out there and pull it off, which would be an upset, but it would also be huge. And yes, it is on the table. And you look at this. The Emerson poll underestimated rural voters by 17 and oversampled suburban voters by 15. So the Emerson poll is vastly underestimating a lot of the voters in these rural areas that are probably going to vote for Dr. Oz. So it's very possible Dr. Oz would win at this stage in the game. I believe he would probably win if the election was today, and I wouldn't say the same thing, a month ago. And they also oversampled suburban voters by 15. So the polls keep missing Mastriano's base, but still are proving that Oz is doing decently well in the suburbs, especially because if you look at the polls and if you look at the crosstabs within them, you will see that a lot of the undecided voters are Republican voters, especially for the Senate race, and that Dr. Oz is winning big among independents. And a lot of the polls that will have Josh Shapiro ahead by 10 also have him getting like 20% of Republicans. Do you really believe that that is the case with current polarization? I mean, Trump, you could say back in 2020, what percentage of Republicans voted for Joe Biden against him? It was not 10%. It was probably closer to 5%, if not below that. And even that's being generous. The notion that Doug Mastriano is going to only get like 75% of Republicans, it's laughable in my opinion. In terms of how he does with independents, that's another question. But either way, we really have yet to determine which polls are really accurate regarding this because of the miss in Western Pennsylvania in a lot of these polls. And it shows. But either way, we do know that Oz is doing well among independents. We do know the base is coming home. There's a lot more undecided Republicans than undecided Democrats. Those undecided Republicans come home. Dr. Oz wins in this poll. And it's very telling. And this is a poll that is underestimating Republicans in the rural areas. This is a poll that is arguably overestimating the suburbs, and it shows that Oz is doing very well in the Philadelphia suburbs, and that's going to be more than enough to get him over the hump against John Fetterman. At the end of the day, like I said, Oz could very well win by more than 3 percentage points, and if he ends up winning by more than expected, do expect him to carry Doug Mastriano to the finish line. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.